war in Ukraine, it's very important, not just Ukrainian people, because they're fighting for their independence, for their identity, for their future life, but for Russian people too. This war need to be won by Ukrainian. And if it will happen, Russia will change too.
Let's now say good afternoon to Marina Litvinenko, who's an activist and the widow of the former Russian agent who defected and became a critic of Vladimir Putin. Marina, welcome to the studio.
Hi, good evening.
It's good to have you here, Marina. Listening to that, seeing what you saw earlier today, that ceremony of reinstalling Vladimir Putin as the leader of Russia, seemingly secure, seemingly impregnable in office for as long as he wishes to be there. What were your thoughts and feelings seeing that?
Yes, when we're talking about fifth term of Russian, I don't want to call him president. Now it's like a Vladimir Putin, again Vladimir Putin, but it's not a president. It's just election of Vladimir Putin, because he never had any alternative. It was never been competitive election when we're talking about the March, back to March. This is like a obvious, we know it's going to be Vladimir Putin. But it's not just his wish. Of course, when you see these people who stayed in Kremlin, these 5,000 people about, tried to cheer Vladimir Putin when he came to Kremlin, and some people outside, they wanted him. I mean, this is some inner circle, because they benefited from this regime. And when we're talking about oligarchs, what we tried to ban, to take under sanctions, yes, we know they've been benefited and they became extremely rich. But these people inside of Russia even try to keep Putin as long as possible, because they are the biggest beneficiary of this regime.
Yeah, I mean, those there gathered obviously had a stake in keeping Putin where he was. It included administrators and others from Ukraine, from those Russian-occupied territories as well. Marina, what is the state of opposition to Vladimir Putin? In the Russian Duma, the parliament, the legislature of Russia, there are opposition parties, but they're pretty loyal to the Kremlin, aren't they? The dissidents are outside, they're exposed to detention and possibly murder. So what's the state of the opposition?
When Putin became president in the first time in 2000, it was obvious people around him who wanted him to be president started to build completely new state without freedom of speech, without freedom of election. And unfortunately, people all around the world realized it's quite late. But it was obvious in 2000. And when Putin was just a virtual person, because nobody knew Vladimir Putin, but they realized if you use TV on the right way, if you use newspapers, you can build any image what you want, and people will believe. And since 2000, all ordinary Russian people was brainwashed, and everything what they saw on TV and read in newspaper, of course, it was just good things about Putin. And of course, it was not any system opposition in parliament.
No.
Particularly after 2004, when Putin became second-time president of Russia, it was not any system opposition. People became fighting just outside on the streets, and we saw in 2011 the biggest protest when election in parliament was just simply stolen. And this was tiny chance to make any change. But it was not enough power to people or understanding what you have to do.
Yes.
And now we have mostly people who against this regime outside of Russia, or being in prison inside of Russia, or afraid to say anything to Putin or to this regime. I only believe to change in Russian society when we have a civil society, when people will think we are not opposition, we're not interested of politics, but when they realize their life so poor, so bad, and you need to change something or anything, and you need to see to other people, not like Putin, not people who support Putin. It might make any change. I would say it's not opposition, and it's the people who don't want to live the same life what they lived for last 25 years under Putin.
A mass change of sentiment, of feeling in Russia about the leader of Russia. Marina, can you envisage, can you see the day that happens? Can you imagine the day that Putin finally falls from power? How would that come about?
When Putin started a war in 2022, he had to do this because it's always he has a power, or if he lost the power, he need to do something worse. What he did in 2014 when war in Ukraine just started, it was obvious he benefited from this, and he has a very high rank. He has a lot of supporters, and in 2022 he needed again. Unfortunately, when he started this war, he been supported just the people, quite a few, like a Minister of Defense, Economy Minister. But after he been elected as a president, he decided he has the support of all people of Russia. It's now he made all Russian people been involved in this war.
When might that change? How will that change?
I absolutely believe war in Ukraine, it's very important, not just Ukrainian people, because they're fighting for their independency, for their identity, for their future life, but for Russian people too. This war need to be won by Ukrainian. And if it will happen, Russia will change too.
There are many Russians who may not be thorough supporters of Vladimir Putin, but who are still sympathetic to the Russian forces fighting in Ukraine, their family members.
It's always happened, and it's not about even sympathy. Putin's regime is buying this sympathy. They're paying an enormous amount of money and to people who never saw this money before, because they've been very poor, from very poor areas. And now they received like millions to pay to go to fight. And it's not a sympathy. And this is the worst things what Putin did to his country. He spoiled people by money, and he spoiled people who became extremely rich, and now he tried to buy this loyalty from people who never been even middle class. But it can't be for a long time. It's not.
And meanwhile then, how do you plan to carry on your campaign, your activism, your raising your voice against the Putin regime to keep the hope of change alive?
When it all started, of course, I did this mostly for myself, for my family, for our friends. But when we made it, I realized it's because I live in a proper country and I have my rights for justice. I have a lot of my human rights. And this made other people think my way, just support it. And now when we have this war in Ukraine, and I see so many people suffered and they need help, support, and I just now doing this one, is all my experience and all my knowledge, what I have, what I did before, I now try to use to help people in Ukraine.
And you feel you're taking a risk, Marina? We know that those who become a thorn in the side of the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, well, some of them come to serious problems. Some of them are at real risk.
I don't think so many people have started to be vocal against Putin. It means he will have not enough army to fight in Ukraine if he need to fight against people outside of Russia. No, don't be afraid. And I would like to remind you this word of Alexei Navalny, who was killed recently. And he said, "I'm not afraid, and you not afraid."
Marina, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts on the day of the inauguration, the 5th inauguration of Vladimir Putin.